Gonna start off though with we had a recent post. Speaking of our Instagram, both of us posts made our top 525 list because ESPN did that, and just gonna follow that mold. Both made our own, and we'll start with what we did first because there was a lot of interesting reactions. I guess you could say interesting, but there's I don't know what's but regardless, there's a lot of commenting and things like that. I should have had that picture pulled up for the Instagram post. But John, if I don't know if you have your ears up, I can tell you right now. I have the post on my phone right now. If you want me to just read it off for both of us.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so John's once again, this is top 5 players under the age of 25 in the NBA right now. So John had Jason Tatum 1, Luka 2, Donovan Mitchell 3rd, Devin Booker 4th, and Zion Williamson 5th. And myself, I also had Jason Tatum 1st, Donovan Mitchell 2nd, Devin Booker 3rd, Luka Doncic 4th, and then Ben Simmons 5th. I think Ben is under 25, right? I probably should have double
I
checked that.
think so.
No one said
I'll look
anything
it
about
up.
that. I'm gonna double check that, but yeah, had a lot of people.
He's 24.
Okay. Oof, just made it. So quickly for me, for my top 5, and no, I had obviously left out Zion. Like I know you had Zion in there, and it was tough to leave him out. I did comment about why, but I left him and John Morant out. They're very close. Zion, I just need to see more to his game. I mean, we saw him dominate. Very efficient this year in the paint, and that's great. But like we're seeing kind of with Giannis, that we'll talk about later. I worry when it comes playoff time. If the team's packed the paint, can he shoot or do more with the ball? Because also not an amazing ball handler. I think Jaw's obviously better, but and then like I said, Jaw's right there. It was tough to leave Jaw out. He almost took Ben for that 5th spot, but once again, it's all very close. But I don't know if you want to go over any of your reasoning, but I'll say this too because we're gonna dive into it. I know a lot of people are upset about Luka, where he put Luka. We're just gonna start. I'll just to go with that. Obviously, I had Luka pretty low, but for me, like we've mentioned, I think we factor in defense too. Luka's I don't know if I need to say an average defender, but at least below average defender. And I know Booker's not an amazing defender, but for me too, and then we talked about this in our chat between the both of us. The athletic ability, I factor that into, and that's why I have Donovan Mitchell at 2. And we're seeing, we're seeing right now, which we'll talk about later. But Donovan, he's splitting double teams right now. Like he's not only showing off his athletic superiority, which is why he's doing well, but his handle's gotten better. I think his shot's more consistent than Luka's, especially at 3. And I'm just saying, there's a reason why LeBron has been so dominant, is because not only was he, a great passer and just IQ and all that and fundamentals and ball handling, but he's LeBron James, which we consider one of the greatest athletes. It's the thing about it's the thing about basketball and football. For the most part, the greater athletes are going to be the better players because you're already starting at a peg above the other people. Not to say it's just and that's just the way it is for some. But and I felt like I just feel like Devin Booker's a better finisher than Luka at the rim. And I think he's a more consistent shooter. Yes, he's not as good of a ball handler, maybe, and a passer, but it was very close there. So that was my reasoning there. Then obviously Ben Simmons at 5 because great defender, great passer, great ball handler. Just Ben, get a shot, and you would probably be 2 if you had at least a consistent mid-range or three-pointer. So, but that was my reasoning. I'm assuming we'll dive more into the Luka fanatics in a second. But what was your reasoning for your top 5?
For just starting with Zion, I mean him, Ben Simmons, John Morant, Jaylen Brown, Trae Young. Like there's just so many guys.
Under 25.
Yeah, he's 24.
Oh, so
I
he's also
almost put him there,
okay,
but
because
this
Jalen
was
would
his
be
first year.
he would be in the conversation for me too.
Yeah, but this is just like his first year really blowing up. So I kind of gave the edge to some of these other guys. Like Zion specifically, I gave the edge over Jalen, just because Zion's done it earlier. And I think that his offensive game, although I think it's more limited, he's just so freaking good at what he does. So and I think that he's got a lot of room to grow. Obviously, I mean, he still struggles with passing, and he turns the ball over quite a bit. Like you said, his handle's not that great. He's not amazing on defense, but just the one thing that he does, he is so elite at. Like he might be the best the best finisher down low in the whole league, and he's a guy who's like 6'7" doing that. So Devin Booker, I mean, I feel like I've been pretty harsh about Devin Booker like his whole career. I
Yeah.
just always felt like he was one of those guys that he was putting up stats, but they weren't winning anything. And in the current age, it feels like, if you're a young player who's putting up a lot of points, like you have to be the guy. And if it's not translating to wins, then maybe you're just a number two. Um, and I think that Chris Paul coming it's elevated Devin Booker, but in a weird way, because I think a lot of people might assume that Chris Paul is like the best player on that team. But as we saw in that Lakers series, when Chris Paul got hurt, they were leaving Chris Paul wide open because he couldn't shoot. I mean, there were stretches where he wasn't even on the floor, and Devin Booker going against Anthony Davis and LeBron James stepped up his game and won them those basketball games. Like he was facing double teams, he was making the right play. He just dominated on a level that like it was incredibly impressive. So I mean, I had to include him obviously. Also, I mean, I know a lot of people when they're talking about young players, they might not include accomplishments. I do. So the fact that he has I think he scored what was it, like 70 points against the
It
Celtics that
was
one
70,
time.
yeah.
So that's a huge accomplishment. He's now won a playoff series against the reigning champs. He's right now up 3-0 against the Nuggets, looking like he's going to go to his first conference finals in his playoff debut. So that was impressive to me. Donovan Mitchell, a guy that when you put him number two, I said I really like how high you put him because I think he's incredibly disrespected because of the fact that he plays in Utah and nobody
Yes,
cares about Utah.
exactly.
Like I've seen lists where he's not even in the top five for people that have been throwing it out, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. Because as we're seeing what he's doing against the Clippers right now, I mean, obviously Luka had a 2-0 lead as well, but Donovan Mitchell is doing arguably better in those first two games to where it is he's just dominating them. He's destroying them, and I don't know how else to put it. I mean, Donovan Mitchell has stepped up repeatedly in the playoffs throughout his career. Last year, we know that they choked that 3-1 lead against the Nuggets. This year, he came back. They handled the Grizzlies after, when he was not playing in that first game, they looked kind of lost. So he's brought stability there. And I'm not sure if the Clippers, which we'll get into this later, but I'm not sure they can come back from this 2-0 deficit with the way the Jazz are playing right now. And Donovan Mitchell he looks like a man on a mission. Luka, I do have at number two, but we'll get into some of his flaws and stuff later because, like you said, there was a lot of negative reaction about him there. But I do think he's an amazing player.
Yeah.
Um, the fact that everything he's done at his such young age is really impressive because a lot of people that he's being compared to didn't do it at the age of 22, like he's doing right now, outside of LeBron, who was doing it at 18.
Yeah.
And then Jason Tatum, I have at number one. I'm biased. I'm a Celtics fan,
I
but
mean,
also, I
I had him
mean,
at number one too. So I mean, I think
yeah, but
there's
his offensive explosion this year. I mean, he got even better, and he was already a really young, promising offensive star. I think that. I mean, I said before the season I thought that he'd establish himself as a top 10 player in the league. I think it's debatable. I think I would hear the argument of including him there.
he's in the
Tough part
conversation.
is
Yeah.
Yeah, the tough part is how many good players in this league. I personally wouldn't put him in there. Put him in that 11 through 15 range. Um, but just the fact that he's a plus side defender, he's guarding the best forwards on the other team. And we saw that a lot this year with Jaylen Brown being out. He had to guard the best forwards, the Kevin Durant's of the world, and he's having success doing that. Um, we've seen, although he's not like the most athletic player in the league, he obviously is incredibly athletic. He can dunk. He can, has the long reach. He can do all that kind of stuff. He can bully people with his strength, as we've seen with his shoulders specifically have gotten like huge.
Yeah.
Um, but also his handle's getting better. His assists per game increased by one every year. So he's getting better at passing. I mean, there's just so many minute details that, once again, as a Celtics fan, I see every game he plays, so I can see the growth over time. And I think that he's the most, out of all these players on here, I think he's the most complete player because he's got the offense, he's got the defense. Obviously, the passing is still something he's working on, but averaging 4 assists, almost 5 assists a game, he's growing in that respect. So those are my five.
Okay.
But I want to talk specifically about the Luka Doncic thing because I know I expected this once I saw that you would put him at four, and then I knew I was not going to put him at one. I expected a lot of people were going to rage about that because Luka Doncic is, for some reason, I don't know why, but a lot of people consider him as like one of the most likable players in the league with like Boban and Taco and all those kind of guys.
I didn't know that.
I don't I don't really like him that much. I think he cries a lot and he led the league in technical fouls, which a lot of people don't want to talk about, but he complains a lot to the refs. He even acknowledges that he complains a lot to the refs, but then he still does it. I don't know. So I'm not the biggest Luka fan just when it comes to his personality. But a lot of people said that he should be the number one player on this list. And I think the reason has to be statistics, right? I mean, he puts up 27, like 8 and 8 every year.
Yeah.
Uh, but my whole issue with that argument is number one, obviously, although he's improved at defense, he is still the worst defender on the court for them. Like depending on the lineup. Obviously, when they bring in some bench guys, there might be some guys like Jalen Brunson who might be worse, just because Luka's bigger. I mean, he's going to have a little bit better advantage. But I mean, which also ties into his athleticism and all this kind of stuff. But he's not a good defender. Like we saw against the Clippers in late game scenarios, Kawhi was forcing switches to where Luka was the one guarding him, and then he would exploit that every single time. So he's not a good defender, which I think a lot of Mavericks fans are going to want to have you believe that he is because he's improved this year, which he has improved, but that doesn't mean he's good. And my biggest rebuttal to the stats thing is sure he fills up the stat sheet, but those same people are going to praise Luka are going to trash Giannis. They're going to trash Russell Westbrook, and they're going to talk about how Russell could never get past the first round by himself. But neither has Luka. He hasn't won a playoff series. Obviously, I mean, he played the Clippers both times, so like
Yeah.
we don't have a huge sample size, right? But like, what is the difference between Russell Westbrook putting up a 40-point triple double and losing in the first round, and Luka doing the exact same thing? I don't get it. Um, I find it ridiculous that Mavs fans say that Luka Doncic has no help. Yes, Porzingis has been incredibly disappointing, and I think they should trade him. But that doesn't mean that Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jalen Brunson and Boban Marjanovic and all these other guys are not contributing. Dorian Finney-Smith, big
Yeah.
contributor, incredibly underrated, best defender on their team. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just think Luka is one of those guys who, because of the stats that he's putting up, and all of a sudden these crazy comparisons that analysts are throwing about like LeBron and Larry Bird just because they're both white and all this kind of stuff. I think that he's one of the more overhyped players in the league because stats are great. Um, but there's a lot of other players who get called out for putting up these stats and not winning.
Yeah. So I think this is just an issue in sports in general. It just seems to be a narrative that was built around Luca that can't be removed, and I think that's why that there's, I guess, this protective shield around him because, like I've mentioned before, and once again, I tried to be consistent. Like I said it. I mean, he's a very Harden-esque kind of style. I said maybe he doesn't play to draw the foul exactly as much as Harden does, but it's a very similar style. That and
He doesn't play draw the foul because he can't hit free throws as well.
and yeah, and yeah, and that's one reason why he's a little low on the list. He's just not as a consistent shooter, and especially, I know he's made clutch shots. I'm not saying he's not clutch, but I just at times when I see, when I watch, especially when I watched this last series, but even like last year too, it just seems like, and maybe it's because of he's the only guy really on the Mavs doing much, and the main ball handler, but it seems like he tires out. I'm not saying he's out of shape or anything. These guys are professional athletes that play basketball. But I think that falls back to what I said earlier. We're not as athletically gifted. And yes, he's got a good handle and, he's got his suddenness. But once again, there are times where you just kind of need your athleticism to bail you out and, maybe buy you a bucket or two. And like I said, we saw that with Donovan Mitchell a few times. I love to see that. I think it was game 1 or 2. I forget. But there's a drive where Kawhi and someone else, they were gonna double team him. They threw the double team at him, and he split the double team. And it really wasn't like he had an amazing handle. He just okay, so he uses his handle to create a seam, but then he just bursts through that seam. I believe he got a layup or a floater off of it. Um, that's just and that's just athleticism there. That's what. And so I think that's one thing for me that why I had Luca so low. Sorry, I'm trying to split my dogs. And then, like we mentioned with the defense too, that and in regards to the Mavs situation, which I imagine we'll talk about later, like I, I'm not sure if it's the way if Luca can only play that way. I'm not. I mean, in the Mavs front office, but like I said before, they're not going to win just playing Luca iso ball, and I think the fact that it's forced I don't know. Once again, I'm not sure, but to me, in my eyes, it seems like it's forced Porzingis to be a role player, and obviously,
I would agree.
and like we mentioned when we did the Game 7 video, I was like, I feel like they need to get you need to get Porzingis some touches when, especially when Luca's off the floor, maybe. And they didn't really do that. They didn't really get any touches on in any touches in the post. And once again, I'm not sure if that's Chris Kristaps not wanting it. I'm not sure if it's the system. But the fact that he was guarded by like Marcus Morris at times or Batum, or Kawhi, guys that he definitely has the height advantage on. And once again, I just sorry, the last point in regards to that, like because we've seen like that was also a part of the allure to Kristaps in New York. We saw him give guys the shimmy, and we saw the post moves. So he has post moves, or at least, and it was just that I'm not sure if the system is allowing him to get in his groove as consistently. He's just really just he's just there as another spot up shooter and rebounder. So I'm not sure if the Mavs need to get more creative offensively. Maybe not have the ball be in Luka's hands 90% of the time, but um, yeah, that's just that's just a little. I guess you could say knock on Luka and the Mavs that I have, but I mean, there's just a lot of good players, and yeah, I mean, I'm not. Maybe it's the highlights of why there's so much allure, this narrative around Luka that he should be number one, but like you and I have mentioned, I mean, we value defense. There's a lot more other things than just the points and assists that rally up to this. And yeah, once again, just to end it at my point, you bring a very fair criticism. It's Russell Westbrook does this. Oh, Russell, he's selfish, things like that. When James Harden, even in Houston, James, you're never gonna win playing that way. I don't know. Maybe Luka needs to get. I'm not. I hope he doesn't. Yeah, I like him as a player, but and as a person, and I don't wish this upon anybody. But maybe in order for this narrative to change, he has to continue to fall short. I really don't know, but
I mean,
it's just a
what
narrative
are
thing.
people gonna do if Luca the next 3 years can't get out of the first round?
I don't
I
know.
think these narrative would shift at that point, but
The fact that it would take
I
that long to
find
do
it
so is crazy.
yeah, I just find it crazy that like Trey Young, Harden, Westbrook, these guys who are they're putting up more assists than Luca is, and they're not considered good passers. But when Luca does it, it's oh, Luca's one of the best passers in the league. Oh, because he made this one behind the back pass. I just don't get the criticism of other players, and Luca is receiving the praise. And I'm not saying that Luca should be necessarily criticized because I think he's a fantastic passer, but I think it's ridiculous when Russell Westbrook is averaging like 11 assists a game, and all of a sudden it's oh he's just selfish. He
Or
just
he's a
always has
ball
the
hog.
ball in
I
his
hate that. He's a
hands.
ball hog. It's like he just got
Yeah,
double digit assists, and then people say, "Well, he's a stat compiler," but like you act like getting 11 assists is super easy in the NBA. It's not.
yeah, and Russell's doing that with like the Wizards
Rui
who obviously
Hachimura,
they have Bradley Beal, but
Bradley
like they have
Beal.
nobody
The Bradley
else.
Beal was, in the playoff series. Bradley Beal was obviously hampered by a bad hamstring, and then after, once again, like we just mentioned, after him it's just went Rui Hachimura. No offense, but he still hasn't really come on the scene as a established NBA player. And Davis
Yeah,
Bertans, like,
and there was Thunder's team where like Steven Adams is not like
oh
some
god,
like he doesn't really have offensive moves. Like
yeah,
he dunks it, right? Like he
all
gets
right.
offensive rebounds, he goes back up.
Well,
You
remember
got,
that team we talked about. It was just like I don't understand how they even made the play. They think they made the playoffs with that team with like hit
yeah, they were
the with
like
the
the
lineup
fifth seed or
with the
something.
main lineup being him, Roberson. Okay, Oladipo is the only good shooter, but then like Sabonis and Steven Adams, like, and then like I think a raw Jeremy Grant before he really became what he is today. But still, that was like Jeremy Grant when he was only really just a defender and not even a solid shooter.
I
So
mean, all their players hadn't developed. Oladipo was not what he became in Indiana. Sabonis was not what he became in Indiana. Like these are I mean, back then these guys were just role players. Like that's all they really were. I mean, they were young, they were growing, but they weren't anything special. and Russell was going crazy, and all of a sudden it's he's a ball hog. But when Luka does it, Luka has no help. He's
So
such a great passer. But he has no help. I just think there's an unfair criticism of other players, and Luka's receiving praise for the same thing. Um, and I don't know. I just think he's on this sort of pedestal right now that maybe that'll change over the time if he continues to come up short. Because I mean, like we've talked about, we've never seen a player that's won a championship playing the style of basketball the Mavericks have, and I don't think that's because Luka is being forced into doing it and they have no help.
yeah. So let's see what happens with the Mavs and them, and then this last point I want to make in regards to this. I love how we say that this is our top five. Obviously, we've
Right.
mentioned before, this is our opinion. I just love how people say, "Oh, well, it's wrong." It's like, no, dude, it's our opinion. Like, like once again, like I think I'm probably brought this up before. People forget like opinion's an opinion. It's not a fact. It's two separate things. We're not saying like these are absolute. It's just once I don't know. It's like it's like if I like chocolate and John doesn't. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say, well, John's wrong for not liking chocolate. You're just wrong. No, that's not right. It's just preference. So that's a thing that annoys me in our sports world. That's probably why these narratives are built. So, but speaking of player that's hasn't had much playoff.
Real
Um,
quick before we move
mhm.
on to, I just want to say final point. Take Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic and name me everything Luka does better except for passing.
I can. I
I'll
mean,
wait.
Tatum's a better finisher.
Statistically, Tatum's a 40 point
I
or a
think.
forty
I
percent three
think their
point shooter.
handles are about even. Maybe Luca might have a hair closer, but even then, like Tatum's a better
I
athlete,
mean,
better
Tatum
finisher,
creates his
better
own
shooter.
shot. He
Yeah,
does the step backs. I mean,
better
he's a
defender.
better finisher, better driver. I mean, the two things I'll give Luca are obviously the passing and the craftiness because he's incredibly crafty to get the shots that he does
Yeah,
with the lack of athleticism he has. But like the holding people on his hips, Tatum has developed that. I even read an article about how his trainer said they specifically stole that from like DeMar DeRozan and Luca, who are both really good at keeping people on their hips. Um, Tatum's a better shooter. Tatum's a better defender at every aspect of defense. Like there's just if you took them side by side, I think the only things you could give Luka the edge on are passing and maybe the dribbles. But other than that, it's either even or Tatum's better.
yeah. So, all right. So going on to the next one.